Hi guys, Devil XYZ, and I'm back with another installment of the Good and the Bad. And I know it's been quite some time since I've really done one of these, but I figured time for me to start jumping back into it this year. And so I guess the first one for this year, anyways, will be Child of Light. Well, Vita version for me, but essentially, what the Child of Light is, I guess a side-scrolling adventure RPG. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's kind of hard to really define in one genre, but yeah, essentially you're playing as a girl named Aurora in a strange land and having to find her way back home. But it turns out the strange land is unique in its own right, and then Aurora eventually finds out what the whole purpose of this land, this strange world that she's living in right now. But yeah, it's been a few years since this game came out. 2014, I believe, says on the box. But yeah, as of this point, how does it turn out in terms of gameplay and quality wise? Well, let's dive right into it. Well, in terms of the good, for one thing I can say is the RPG aspect wise, getting into it is actually pretty simple. You know, the game itself is, I mean, overall, it's actually a simplistic game. It does have basic RPG elements built into it, but for the most part, it's actually easy to get into. It's nothing really too complicated, and really any newcomer to the RPG genre can essentially get a grasp of this pretty easily. And I guess along with those lines, I do like the fact that you have an abundance amount of characters in the game. So make that the second point. Yeah, a good amount of characters. I think you have roughly about 9 or 10 characters in total. We each with their strengths and weaknesses, because some of them are kind of like the defensive type characters. Some of them are like the magic type users, and then I have others that are like offensive type, mostly in brute strength and anything else. And then I had maybe a couple that are in like in balanced territory. The third thing I would have to say is the skill building tree that's kind of in the game itself. Each character has a set of skills, and as you gradually level up the character, their skills increase over time, making their attacks or possibly their individual skills, their independent ones, and even more powerful themselves. And even also the permanent stat building skills, like building up strength or speed or defense, magic defense, whatever. Fourth, I would have to probably say is the unique balance between the platforming adventure type portion of the game where you're actually kind of navigating through the world itself, and then when you transport into the RPG aspect of the game, I do like the good balance between it. And also, it doesn't feel like it kind of feels like they're building upon each other, as you know, whatever you do in the real world is actually affected towards the RPG world itself. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, but you know, essentially, like if you were to like get hurt in the real world, that would actually reflect your character stats in the whenever you go into actual RPG fighting. So, I mean, it's kind of a good crossover, and I kind of like blending those two elements together that way. Well, in terms of the bad, there are a few things, unfortunately. I'll have to say the first thing would be the limited number of characters that are on the screen throughout the RPG aspect. Whenever you get into a fight, at most you're ever going to really fight is just 3 enemies, which I guess maybe some might say would be a blessing, but I mean, it just kind of feels pretty limited, considering even in boss fights, at most you'll get is just 3, including the boss themselves. So, I mean, it's not like a huge for the most part, it's not really a huge threat for the most part. You know, so it's always going to either be mostly like 2 or 3 enemies on the screen at once. And I guess also along those lines, teammate wise, you only are allowed one teammate, so it's just a 2 player party, which kind of odd for an RPG. I've never really experienced one with only just a 2 player team. I mean, typically it would be at the very least 3, but I mean, it's just how it is, I guess. So it just kind of feels pretty limited in terms of like working with your teammates to help each other out. In terms of like like healing, buffing, doing stuff to with your partner to help each other win the fights. It just feels pretty limited. Second, I would have to say the game itself is, I mean, kind of in a way acts like a storybook, so to speak. So everything is kind of told in rhyme. Um, my only problem with that is some of the things that you kind of need to do, or some of the optional things that you want to do, is all told through rhyme. And in that regard, sometimes it might be a little bit difficult to really decipher as to what exactly you need to be doing. Because, I mean, obviously they're trying to keep the rhyming scheme going throughout the entire game, which, I mean, I do applaud them for that, but at the same time, it doesn't make it clear at some moments of the game where what you need to be doing. And so sometimes it might be a little bit lost as to what's the next thing you need to do in order to progress through the game. Then the third I'll have to say is they have what is known as a crafting. Well, I have a crafting system known as the oculi, essentially combining multiple stones together to create bigger versions of the stones, so you gain better powers essentially. And with that regard, I mean, I do like the fact that you are able to craft things to kind of give yourself a boost, or anything that can like affect your personal stats, or anything like in the battle itself, like maybe increasing your speed on the timeline, increasing power, defense, stuff like that. But unfortunately, the amount of combinations it does get unfortunately limited as well, as there's only like a certain number of things that you can craft out of all of that, unfortunately. And even also with that, it's just the amount of material needed to craft it takes a lot to craft into bigger stuff, which is sometimes a little bit hard to find out in the field itself. Well, in terms of improvements, there are a couple of things I can really think of. I guess for one, obviously, adding more characters into the fights themselves, the RPG fights. Uh, I mean, something maybe close to like what you get out of Final Fantasy. Maybe having like at least three characters on your team, maybe going up against like maybe 4 or 5 enemies. Now, I just kind of feel like having the numbers as is right now, it just feels pretty small, considering this is supposed to be an RPG anyway. And then second, I would have to probably say, if there was a way to actually include more like side objectives, side quests, stuff like that, to make the game a little bit longer, because oddly for an RPG, this is actually a pretty short one. I mean, even doing most of these side quests that are already available in the game anyway, I say it would take you maybe about 10 to 12 hours to beat it, and it's kind of short for an RPG I've ever experienced. But I'm not saying it's bad, but I would like to have maybe more, and especially the fact that kind of even like late into the game, like the last final chapters, you're actually still collecting, or you're actually still gaining more allies, actual teammates, even like very late in the game, which I kind of feel like doesn't really give them much time to really grow upon, leveling up their skills and stuff like that. So I just kind of feel like maybe some more additional side quests that to at least pad out the game a little bit more, to kind of give you some time to kind of work out with the rest of the teams, the rest of the teammates. Well, overall, I'd say the Child of Light is an interesting RPG game, or I guess action adventure RPG. It's kind of a weird cross in genres, which I mean, it's an interesting twist, and I kind of find it one of the more unique games I ever played. But I think really for the most part, the big issues for me is just the fact that it feels limited in some aspects. But at the same time, I do like some of the stuff they add into it, kind of balancing between two different genres, and at the same time, kind of, making this more into like an actual storybook as opposed to making it just like a straight up fantasy type game, like, well, Final Fantasy, I guess. So something a little bit more original to that regards. But I think overall, though, it's kind of one of those games I say is actually pretty easy to get into. So especially if you've never played any RPG games, or anything related to that, I say it's a pretty good game to start with, and maybe just gradually moving your way up to like Final Fantasies, and yeah, I guess if you really want to punish yourself, maybe you go into something like Demon Gaze, but that's like another story. But overall, though, I'd say this game's actually not too bad. I do recommend it, considering as of right now the game is actually being ported over to the Switch. So I would say it's a pretty good game to really add into the collection. And I guess with that, I would probably give The Child of Light a final score of 8 out of 10, in my opinion. It's actually a pretty decent game, and I think it's really worth it, in my opinion. So, I mean, for those who have never really dabbled into a genre like this before, I'd say have at it. I mean, the game's not long for that regard, so I mean, it's not like something you're going to be endlessly grinding out for days or weeks or months, whatever. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can find some real enjoyment out of this. Alright guys, this is Devil Hunter XYZ, and until next time.